These are the strongest passives in SAO Fractured Daydream. What's going on, everybody? Long time no see if you've been a fan of the channel for a while, and if not, welcome in, have a seat, good to see you. I've been playing SAO Fractured Daydream for a little bit now, and honestly, I'm not as high rank as I would like to be, but I have had plenty of time to test out and see how all of the character passives work. Now, if you don't know much about endgame in this game yet, essentially building characters comes down to a few different things. One is obviously going to be your items, but another major thing that you have to think about is what passives you want to equip to your characters. Now, there's tons of different passives in the game. There's one unique passive for every character, but you can actually equip 2 passives to each character, and you unlock every character's unique passive on other characters at level 30. So essentially, if you want, let's say, Asana's unique passive, high accuracy, if you want to take this one and you want to throw it on another character like AG, for example, you need to get Asana to level 30. You can see character rank 30. Now, the big reason you want to unlock these other passives is because it can actually massively affect your gameplay and your damage output. It's an extra bonus on top of whatever sort of build you're using. And this can do a lot for you. Not all passives are built the same though. Some passives are significantly better than others, and some passives are honestly, they're stinky poo-poo dookie trash, and you just don't want to use them. So I've compiled all of the stats for all of the passives, and I'm going to quickly go over all of them and which ones are the best. So that way you guys know which characters you actually want to spend time leveling to unlock their passives for your main. With that being said, my name is Brax, and let's just get into it. So I'm going to take Kirito here and I'm going to look at passives. So the first passive is damage dealer. This is Kirito's unique passive, and what it does is it gains you an attack buff whenever your combo counter exceeds the threshold. Now, this is honestly a little confusing if you haven't tested it yourself, or if you haven't like data mined the game or something, because it doesn't tell you what the threshold actually is. You have to experiment with it to find it. I actually know what the threshold is. It's 20. So as long as you get to a combo of 20 or higher, you're gonna get an attack buff, and the attack buff is pretty significant. It's 20% attack as long as that combo is higher than 20. The downside to this passive is that the combo, as soon as it drops off, you lose the attack buff. So it can be really nice when you're in rooms with a lot of enemies and you can just keep attacking and going enemy to enemy to enemy. It lets you outscale them after a little bit, and it's good against bosses that you're really good at hitting. But for bosses that like to spend a lot of time running around the arena, it could be really character dependent to find out like where this passive can actually be useful. I think this is a decent passive overall. I don't think it's the best one, and I don't think it's close. Next up is high accuracy. Now, this is Asana's passive, and it's quite a bit better in my opinion than damage dealer up from Kirito. Basically, it's going to give you crit rate up whenever the combo counter exceeds the threshold. This is the exact same combo as Kirito. So once you get up to a 20 combo, you get 20% crit rate, which is really good when you can get the 20 combo. Now, for some characters, this is basically useless because you're just never going to see that combo, or it's going to be really highly unlikely that you'll see the combo. And so I wouldn't call this the best passive, but because it offers a lot of crit rate, it is pretty dang solid. The next passive is Spirit Charge. Now, this is Sinon's passive. Whenever you land an attack on a weak point, and it'll say weak, you have a chance to recover HP. This could actually be good in some situations, but I have yet to find a situation where it's that worth it, because generally speaking, the healing that you have, if you're playing pretty well, will be enough, especially once you learn the boss attack patterns, that doesn't matter. But it's not a bad one. I just believe that going for the damage ones is generally going to be a little bit better, unless you're someone who hasn't really learned a ton of the stuff about all of the bosses and things, and then in which case this can be kind of nice. But you also have to know your weak points. So there you go. It is easier to hit on characters with guns because you can aim them, and that makes it really nice. I will say though that the passive healing is not that significant. It's a 15% chance to get 3% of your HP back. So it would be really good on a character like Len, because Len can shoot the weak point a ton of times, and that seems like just a fast way to get your health back, but it's not going to work for all characters that well. Next up is going to be Flight Master, and this is Lifa's signature. Now, this one I think is actually a little bit slept on. It increases your attack while jumping or in flight, and there's a lot of characters that have jump combos. I mean, I would say majority of characters, if not all of them, have some sort of jump combo, save for like the sniper characters, right? But the attack increase is actually what makes this pretty good. It's 25% for being in air or in flight. Now, for comparison, Kirito's buff was 20% for a 20 combo. So Flight Master is more attack And some characters that can fly don't even have to worry about getting this buff up a significant amount of the time because they can just stay in the air. So Leafa has one of the better passives to get. Absolutely, her passive is really good, but it is situational by the character. Some characters will just not use this at all. I would just say, generally speaking, for anyone who can fly, this is super good. And just for any character that has 2 legs and can jump, it's a really good one. Next up is Lightning Counter, and this is Lizmeth's. I'm honestly not a huge fan of this one because it requires you to play around dodges and guards. And if you're dodging and guarding, you're not attacking. Now, this does attack back, which is like part of the gimmick of it. And it actually has a chance to stun. It's about a 25% chance to stun. And that stun can be good if you have certain legendaries that scale off of that. So with that being said, I personally am not a huge fan of this, but you can definitely make some really cheeky builds, especially when there's a lot of enemies around you. And that is pretty cool. But this wouldn't be the top of my priority if you're just looking to make a damage build that's super strong. But maybe like later in the game, when you have like a meme build, this one's going to be pretty good. Poor Silica, dude. Mid-tier idol is such a like, oh, that's so insulting. All right, so Silica's passive is going to make it so that you actually get more healing from healing skills and healing crystals. I'm going to keep it real with you guys. Unless they add some tier of rating where you need like some HP stats and stuff to really survive the hits, this is going to be basically useless for you. It's an 8% healing increase. You would much rather just have other abilities. I'm sorry, Silica fans. Now, Yuki's ability is so incredibly strong. Basically, below 50% HP, you get a 20% attack buff. And below 25% HP, you get a 40% attack buff. That's actually the highest you can get from any of these off the bat. And because Yuki's ability with her left button, if you play with a controller, basically allows you to lose your HP over time, this can be absolutely insane for her and just increasing her general damage. It's a very good one for her. However, for most characters, this isn't going to be super useful unless you want to play like really low HP and just not get hit. If you're good at those no hit runs, this can be highly rewarding, but most people are not going to use this one. Now, this one with Argo, surprise attack. I was very surprised at how good this one was. I thought this was going to be mid, but after spending a ton of time in the boss battles, you can spend a lot of time behind bosses to hit them because a lot of the bosses just will be like attacking whatever's in front of them. And you don't want to spend your time in front of them unless you're a tank. And even then, it's like you still don't want to take damage, right? Argo is great because if someone else is playing a tank, they're taking the aggro of the boss and you can just smack them from behind for a massive 30% damage bonus just for hitting them from behind. So with that said, I actually think Argo has one of the best passives because 30% for hitting the enemy from behind is absolutely insane. The downside is for trash mobs, it's really easy for non-tanks to end up tanking the trash mobs just because, you know, they die so fast and there's so many of them. So this could end up not being super useful when it comes to the co-op raids that are not just boss battles, but it will be super useful against the bosses like a ton of the time. I'm actually working on this one right now because this passive is so strong. And so is Argo, by the way, but I'll make a character tier list later. Now, Klein's passive, I've actually seen a lot of people playing Klein recently, and I think people being fans of Yuki might be why. Essentially, it's going to increase your attack for a short period of time after you take damage, and that period of time is about 10 seconds of 30% attack buff. So 30% attack after taking damage. Honestly, guys, I'm not a huge fan of it on most characters, but on Yuki specifically, a character who damages herself and who the effect actually works with, you can get up to a 70% attack bonus from your passives on Yuki, which is crazy to think about. Like if you have crit from your other things and you get a crit mod and you get to like 45% crit rate, and then you have your 2 passives, that is disgusting. That is a ridiculously high amount of attack bonus to get, and it's gonna absolutely just shred everyone and everything. So Guts is worth it if you play Yuki. I think if you don't play Yuki, you don't need it, but it can still be decent just because 30% attack is pretty high. All right, so Egil. If you played this game for a while, you know that when you use your advanced skills, it locks you in place. Essentially, what Egil's gonna do is decrease the damage you take when you use your advanced skills. The downside to this is that there are just so many better passives in the game that you'd want. Maybe if you're playing a tank and you have the boss aggro on you, it'd be nice to be able to mitigate some of that damage, but it is only 20% damage. So I personally don't think this one's super worth it, but if you like Egil or if you play tank, it could be helpful for you, especially if they introduce a newer endgame that just slaps the hell out of you. So okay, so the next character up is going to be Len, and essentially she just gives crit rate of ranged attacks based on how close or far you are. The closer you are, the higher the crit rate. The further you are, the lower the crit rate. It goes up to a max of 12%. I think this would have been super busted if it was like 20%. Even 12% is nice though, especially if you're playing like, let's say Sturban, or if you're playing Xenon and you end up getting close for any sort of melee abilities. I know Sturban has melee abilities and so does Len. So getting up close can be super useful because it just gives you a ton of crit rate, but it's not the best source of crit rate that you have on this character and on other characters. So I don't think it's super necessary, but if you do play Rangers, you're probably going to want to pick it up. All right. So the next one is extroverted, and you guys don't need this. It seems actually pretty interesting on paper. It's going to increase your attack for every male character in your party and HP for every female in the party, which sounds great, but the amount it increases is so low. For every man you have, you get 1.5 attack, 1.5% attack, and for every female you have 1.5% HP. So the amount you actually gain is really minuscule. I don't think you need this one. You can give her passives that will be better than this one. Next up is Alice. You have a chance to take 0 damage from an enemy attack. I believe this is a 5% chance to just not take any damage. I'm gonna keep it real, guys. 5%. If this was like 20%, that would be insane. And I would say like there might be some instances where if you're a newer player, or if you're just like not super good at the game and like you recognize that, this could be super helpful. But 5% is just not worth it in my opinion. You don't need Alice's passive, although Alice is a super fun character to play. So you'll probably get her to level 30 anyways, but I'm not using this passive. You guys don't need to use it either. UJO, on the other hand, is actually, he has an interesting skill. So he has a chance of freezing the enemy when you hit him with an advanced skill. This works for every single hit of his skill. So if he has multi-hit skills, every single hit is going to have an 8% chance of freezing. Now, the main downside of this is that it is only 8%. So even when you use enhanced skills, it's not like you have like a super high chance of freezing. You would want to pair this, if you were going to use it, you would want to pair it with some things that increase your crit rate when enemies are like frozen, and then like a weapon that increases your chance to freeze enemies as well. There are a lot of legendaries in the game that have like really cool effects. I remember seeing someone with an AG build that had like a freezing weapon. So I'm sure it's in the game for UGL. And if it's not, then I'm a clown and I'll put on my clown shoes and my clown makeup and see myself out. I think this is a really interesting skill. I don't think you need the passive, but I think it has a lot of potential and like super well done endgame builds. So we'll see where it goes. I do like it a lot. I think it's super fun. Heathcliff has immortal armor. This basically just gives him a 25% damage reduction below 25% HP. It might be 30% actually. I'm not remembering off the top of my head. This is going to help you survive one extra hit before dying to a boss. So it is nice quality of life. You definitely want to go for something else on Heathcliff, and you don't need this. But if you are someone that's struggling to stay alive during some quests and stuff, then I could see a good use for it. I personally wouldn't pick it up. Now here comes one of the best passives in my opinion. This one is called Quietus and increases your crit rate when you attack stunned, frozen, or downed enemies. And the crit rate it gives you is 30%. 30% is massive. That is a whole blue modifier for crit rate, and that's going to drastically increase your damage. Now, the downside is it's only when enemies are stunned, frozen, or down, but there are lots of characters that stun. There's a character that freezes that we just talked about a moment ago, and it works on downed enemies. This basically means when you're in your burst phase against bosses or elites, this will activate and you'll get 30% crit rate against them, which is just a game changer. That amount of crit rate on a passive is insane, and especially if you build a freezing build with a character, this is going to be disgusting. In my opinion, this is unironically one of the best passives in the entire game. I do think everyone should get this. You're not going to use it on every single character, but there's going to be a lot of characters you can use it on, and in endgame, when you start getting all your legendaries, this will be disgustingly good. Yuna's ability is honestly not, it's a good support ability. Party members receive more HP upon revival. It revives your allies at 80% HP. It's just kind of a nice like bonus to whenever you pick up allies. If you're playing a support character, it makes sense. However, Yuna has ridiculously high damage, and I find it hard to put a supporting passive on her, even though she is a support, because she can just dish out so much insane damage. So personally, I wouldn't use it and I wouldn't go for it. But if you're a team player and you like reviving people and helping people out, that 80% will be super helpful. So, and now I'm going to bring you to one of the strongest passives. This one is called Conquering Weakness, and it's by AG. If you haven't seen SAO Ordinal Scale, you should absolutely watch it. It increases crit rate when you attack a powerful enemy. How much? It's only 10%. It's nothing super disgusting like the 30% from Quietus, but think about this. It's 10% crit rate forever and always against bosses and elites. You do not have to do anything to get this crit rate except fight a boss or an elite, and you get 10% for free. I think that's pretty insane because unlike some abilities that have like a combo lock behind them or like stun requirement and stuff, this is literally just free crit rate. It's disgustingly good. I would absolutely pick this one up. Plus AG is fun to play. I really like this character. I think if you bring him into stuff, you'll have a lot of fun leveling him too. So personally, that's my go-to. Conquering Weakness is just it's so strong. If you don't know what to put on a character, this is always a good choice if you're in a boss raid. And even in open world, you're getting like 10% on all the elites. So all right, so I absolutely hate this guy, but he runs really funny. And he has an ability that's decent for more casual players. Basically, you recover HP when you finish off an enemy. This means in boss raids or in open world, it's really easy to sustain yourself. You don't have to worry about the limited 3 heals that you have. Now, it's not a ridiculous amount of HP. It is only 5%, but 5% can add up a lot, especially if you're in a room full of enemies. But personally, I hate playing this guy, so I'm just not going to level it. But, you know, you do you. Now, this next one was one that I was confused about for a really long time. It's called Admin Privileges. Basically, it gives you a random buff every time you raise your awakening level. It gives you attack up, crit rate up, max HP up, damage reduction, experience gain up, and cooldown speed up. It can give you one of any of those for every single level you climb, specifically in a mission. So this isn't like, oh, you're level 47 outside the game, here's a ton of buffs. No, that's not how that works. For the attack, crit rate, max HP, and damage reduction, you get 2% of any one of these, and for experience and cooldown speed, you get up to 4%. Now, I'm gonna keep it real, guys. This one seemed really promising, but it's basically just completely RNG, right? You could get an insanely cracked build by hitting attack and crit rate a bunch, or you could just get a terrible build by level 20 because you just hit damage reduction, experience, and max HP, right? The issue is that there are 3 good skills to get. Technically 4. Experience gain isn't bad, but it's not going to set you ahead a ton. Max HP and damage reduction they're just not super necessary unless you're tanking with her, which is not her determined role. So because of this, if you like Mario Party and RNG in games, Admin Privileges is a good pickup, but I don't like it. I think that it's a bad pickup for most players. And lastly is Yui. She lengthens the window for perfect dodge and perfect guard. Now it doesn't specify anything, but it's a 60% increase in perfect dodge and perfect guard timing, which for some characters can be good. You could use this with Liz's passive and it would be pretty strong, though me personally, I'd rather build for crit and attack, but you can get this and stack it with Liz's passive and it ends up being pretty decent overall. If you need assistance with the dodges and guards, I totally get it. The timings on these are a little wonky. It's a little more punishing than other games because you can't just animation cancel everything. So this could actually be super helpful for other players, but it's not my number one go-to. It's just not that bad. But okay, so now I've told you what every single passive does. Which ones are the best? Which characters should you level? Well, of all of the abilities, there's a few that really stand out. And in my opinion, you're always going to want to go for the ones that give you stats that are a little bit harder to obtain in game. Like, you know how you go in a game and you always are looking for specific mods? Maybe you're looking for crit rate or you're looking for weakness damage up or something like that. Well, the same thing kind of applies to passive. For example, Asuna's high accuracy is one of the stronger passives because it gives up to 20% crit rate. And if you don't know what that means you have 20% chance to do double damage. You get a 30% mod on top of that. You have 50 crit rate after your combo of 20, which means that 50% of your attacks do 200% of your normal damage. This ends up being really, really strong. Farming for crit in this game does make a huge difference to your damage overall. And I think that going for crit passives is going to make a really insane difference for your account and your builds. That's why Quietus, I talked so highly of it because 30% crit rate on enemies that are downed means that during your burst phase, 30% crit rate, a ton more damage. And against stunned and frozen enemies, you'll run into a lot of those. The downside is that bosses are basically only going to see downed. Like it's just, you know how it is if you played this game. So you might lose that if enemies don't go down, and that would make the value of this go down on average, which is why I personally believe that Conquering Weakness is one of the best all-around ones that you can pick up. We already have it on Asuna here. Increases crit rate when you attack a powerful enemy. Anytime you're bossing, free 10 crit rate is just so disgusting. It's just such a big damage buff for doing absolutely nothing on a passive ability. There are other passives that are super strong though that aren't crit related. For example, Surprise Attack, which is Argo's ability, is really strong if you play behind enemies. If you actually play for this passive, that damage increase is going to be crazy and it's going to stack with your crit, right? If you're doing more damage non-crit and then you get a crit mod, it's really such a big damage difference overall. That and Flight Master, if you're playing a flying character, that attack buff is disgusting. And overall, most of the things that are going to increase your attack or crit are going to be just really solid investments. Now, with that said, there's some that are specific specifically good for specific characters. Like Yuki's passive, Spirit of Determination, basically only works super well with Yuki, but then you combine it with Guts from Klein and it's ridiculously good. Now, the only downside of Kirito and Asuna's is the 20 combo is honestly harder to get in practice with some characters than it is on paper, right? You think 20 combo and you're like, oh, easy, you just keep attacking and then you dodge whenever the enemy moves away into the enemy and then just keep attacking, right? But if you get staggered once, your combo's over. Most of the, like 99% of the time, you're not recovering from a combo if you get staggered. So it can be pretty punishing, but if you play characters that are fast, if you're playing like Eiji, for example, he can get that bonus from Asuna super fast. So anyways, with that being said, I hope this clarified some things for you on the passives in this game. I want to talk about some of the characters and how to farm XP for them, but that'll be for another video. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to like the video down below, consider subscribing, and I'll catch you next time.